In the studio with me, Scotty, Nell, Hughes, director of the Tea Party News Network and the author of the new book, Roar! The New Conservative Woman Speaks Out.
That was an awesome roar right there, by the way. That was probably one of the most manliest, strongest roars I've heard yet.
Well, congratulations on your book, Scott.
Thank you.
Yes,
great.
It's complete with blurbs from what? Grover Norquist?
Yes, it does.
Where's Grover? He's got to be in here, right?
Oddly enough. Here's the funny thing. Honestly, if you read the background, you want to get your phone lines lit up, just read the back. If people want to know who I am, read the back. You want to get them angry?
Okay. The media, you're talking about the bottom or the top?
The top.
Okay.
Of who I am.
I'm a gun-fearing, God-fearing, gun-toting, baby-loving, traditional marriage-believing, SUV driving, I don't care about my carbon footprint, border-securing, Benghazi truth-seeking, Fox News and the Blaze TV watching, lamestream media smacking, sip my sweet tea with a big gulp drinking, rhino hunting, target of IRS auditing, one nation under God pledging mom.
Did you just hear progressives' heads just explode? Because I know liberals listen to your show because you're the #1 liberal talk show host in the country.
We have a lot of Christians who listen. We've got a lot of gun owners.
I'm just saying.
I'm a target shooter. We've got a lot of people with babies. I have 3. I mean, they're grown up now. But
exactly. But you know what each one of those means. It's pro-life. But that's right there. Exactly. You want to know who I am. But that's why we get along.
I'd like to know the truth of Benghazi. It seems that the truth is that there was no there.
We had no strategy. Ever heard that before?
Border securing, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think East Berlin was really a good model for us.
Well, I don't think they're trying to make East Berlin be Texas right now. I think what they're doing is trying to keep the illegals out of this country. And that's the one thing, here on the eve of 9/11.
Stopping inviting them.
Huh? Well, that's a great idea. Stop inviting him, President Obama. Yeah. Why sitting there incentivized? See, we get along. I wish Congress got along as well we did.
I mean, ever since Reagan said, I'm not going to enforce the laws against white people hiring illegals.
Now, listen, Reagan admits that was a mistake he did.
Reagan's dead.
You keep talking to him, you brought him up. But, that's the great thing about the immigration debate. They go back and look at Reagan. Oh, look, Reagan did it. Yeah, and Reagan regretted it. And Reagan thought that would solve the immigration issue. It didn't solve it at all. He gave amnesty to everybody here. So why does President Obama, why are the Republicans, the rhino Republicans?
Reagan regretted that. I mean, by the time, he never talked about it when he was in office, and after he left office, he almost immediately had Alzheimer's so bad he wasn't doing public.
Yeah, I think at some point, they quoted him somewhere that he actually said that was one thing that he regretted doing, was making that decision right there. We're going to find that. We're going to Google it.
That would surprise me. Okay.
But anyway.
Let's talk about ISIS. The president tonight is going to give a talk on ISIS. And
very inappropriate.
I'm of the opinion that, a series of largely Republican presidents have totally blown this thing. No, I'll give you the
You're
reason.
Going to give an example.
Start out. Jimmy Carter in 1977.
Wasn't he a Democrat?
Yeah, he was a Democrat.
Okay.
Jimmy Carter, do you have the clip, Shano? Shano's going to get it.
Awesome.
Jimmy Carter said, we are going to stop being dependent on these guys in the Middle East. This is crazy. Mm-hmm. This was after the Arab oil embargo that caused inflation in the United States to go up to 15%. And here's what Jimmy Carter said. Listen to this.
The energy crisis is real. It is worldwide. It is a clear and present danger to our nation. These are facts, and we simply must face them. What I have to say to you now about energy is simple and vitally important. Point 1, I am tonight setting a clear goal for the energy policy of the United States. Beginning this moment, this nation will never use more foreign oil than we did in 1977. Never.
There you go. Never. We're going to stop using more foreign oil, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then he said, and we're going to generate 20% of our electricity by the year 2000 from solar power. Here it is.
Moreover, I will soon submit legislation to Congress calling for the creation of this nation's first solar bank, which will help us achieve the crucial goal of 20% of our energy coming from solar power by the year 2000.
Now, and he was successful in doing that. He got that legislation passed. Both of those pieces of legislation passed. Ronald Reagan undid them. Ronald Reagan took the solar collectors off the roof of the White House. Ronald Reagan was brought into power by oil money. Ronald Reagan said, we're going to increase our dependence on oil, not decrease it. And we did. He was successful in doing that. And I would say that if Reagan had not cut a deal with the Ayatollahs to hold the hostages so that Jimmy Carter lost the election, if that had not happened, and you've got the president of Iran on record, Bonnie Sadr, at the time talking about this, if that had not happened and Carter's policies had stood, we would not be in the Middle East right now at all.
Okay, let's back it up. First of all, as a wise man quoted about a minute ago, Ronald Reagan's dead. But since we're going back again, just saying, don't you hate when words come back to you? Let's go back to it. First of all, if Jimmy Carter, if you want to sit there and say that he lost or the Democrats lost control and Ronald Reagan was able to come in, who truly Ronald Reagan followed in the footsteps of Barry Goldwater. I mean, he's a very strong conservative. Well,
I mean, he talked that line, but he actually raised taxes 19 times on working people.
He was elected on a Barry Goldwater type platform. The conservatives, that's what they believed he was going to be like. Right. Okay. Jimmy Carter did not lose because of that. Jimmy Carter, if those policies were so true, if he had actually put actions into them, he would have been reelected. There's not a single person.
He did. There are houses all
over the country. So then why wasn't he reelected? Why did he lose?
Well, 6 months out of the election, he was 5-6 points ahead. He was going to be reelected. But then the hostages were taken in Iran, and the news started covering it every single night. Carter made the mistake of asking the country to pray for it, not knowing that Bill Casey had gone to Paris and cut a deal with the Iranians to hold those hostages until after the election.
It had nothing to do with the people that were waiting for hours upon hours at gas stations trying to get gas.
That wasn't going on in 1980. That was going on back in 73, 74, 75.
Okay. Well, like I said, if he was so popular back then, he would have been reelected. It doesn't matter about the hostages. That not one issue can sit there and take some down.
It absolutely
Unless you
did.
want to sit there and say Katrina's the one that took the Republicans out of power.
Katrina hurt Bush, but I think it hurt Bush more with minority voters than it did with white voters.
Well, then let's talk about the president right now. Then fine. Then let the president open up Keystone Pipeline. The number one thing.
What does that have to do with anything?
100%. If you're sitting there saying Carter was so great because he wanted to make us less dependent on foreign oil, the number one thing that would help us make less dependent on foreign oil, hence why the Middle East is such a powder keg, would be opening up the Keystone Pipeline.
I hate to shatter your illusions.
Okay, my illusion.
But we actually have refineries coming from the Keystone Pipeline right now. We have for a couple of decades. They're in Missouri. They're in Kansas, they're in Indiana, they're in Michigan.
So then what's the big debate about?
And those refineries are making gasoline and diesel fuel for the United States. What the owners of the Keystone Pipeline, TransCanada, have said, and you can read it on their website, is that if they can complete their pipeline all the way down to the Gulf Coast so that they can refine and export that oil and gasoline, prices for oil and gasoline in the United States will go up 15 cents a gallon on average. They're quite open about it. The reason they're trying to get to the water is so they can put this stuff in tankers. It's not for
And they
America.
wouldn't want to keep it here.
They absolutely
They want to take it across.
No, the international market is
huge. So it would
huge.
not help us in any way here in the United States.
That's correct.
Okay.
And
that's interesting.
and it's not me saying this. This is TransCanada saying this.
Okay.
They're not doing that pipeline. They're doing it for export. They're not doing it for the American
it's not all about saving the owls or all the environmentalists that are sitting. The reason why, it's the environmental lobby that's keeping the Keystone Pipeline closed. It's not the economists. It's not the people sitting here talking about it's the environmentalists that are keeping it closed.
To some extent.
Majority of it.
There's also people who are concerned about global warming.
Well, it's environmentalists. So it has nothing to do about raising taxes. They're not here fighting it.
My biggest concern about Keystone, and then I want to get back to ISIS, my biggest concern about Keystone is that we get to keep the poison and England and China and Brazil get the gasoline, right? We refine it here. When you refine something where you refine it, you get all the downwind poison. So Cancer Alley in Texas and Louisiana is going to triple in size as a result of the Keystone Pipeline. It's much more toxic than any other form of oil.
Then why do the people want it there?
Because
why do these people want
the
it?
Koch brothers are promoting the Koch brothers own those refineries. The Koch brothers are the second largest landowner of American landowners of oil sands up in Canada. They are pushing this thing because they can make as much as, some estimates are, over $100 billion. If you had $100 billion in the line, wouldn't you spend a few $100 million
just to buy up people's votes?
Buy politicians and buy the media and get PR firms out there saying, we need this for American energy independence. No, we don't. We need it so that the Koch brothers can make $100 billion.
Works for George Soros.
No, it doesn't. George Soros
he's
does
one
not.
Of those,
he invests things in
Warren Buffett.
He invests in things that cost him money. Warren Buffett invests in things that are going to raise his tax.
Okay.
You want to stick around?
I do. This is fun.
Scotty Nell Hughes is with us. We will take some calls too. We'll see how this thing goes. Scotty's new book is called Roar. The New Conservative Woman Speaks Out.
I left my Kevlar at home.
Okay, we'll be right back. 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Scotty's book goes on sale nationwide next week, although you can find it on the usual online sources right now. R-O-A-R, Roar, by Scotty Nell Hughes. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And okay, let's pick up a couple of calls here, Scotty. Okay.
Ooh, yay! I'm excited.
Robin in Kingston, Washington, watching Free Speech TV on Direct TV. You are on the air with me and Scotty Nell Hughes.
Hi, Tom. This question actually is an overall thing about conservatism. One of the questions never asked about, touching back to what you're talking about, George Bush getting elected the first time. One of the questions that was never asked about Herkowitz's question, as quoted by Cindy,
Right.
was what would the military-industrial complex do when Bush announced that he would go back into Iraq before he got elected? And when I say the military-industrial complex, I'm including obviously all the military providers, the corporations, the Pentagon itself, and the politicians who are owned by that.
Okay.
Also, I know Barbara Honegger. I know Honegger, and I'm right on the Casey thing. And the third thing is that Carter was set up to fail because there were dozens of fully laden oil tankers sitting off of New York City, out of sight. I used to be an air traffic controller up in the Northeast, and the pilots have talked about this all the time. They needed to control Carter, and part of that whole oil embargo thing was absolutely contrived.
Huh.
So
Interesting.
I guess you can put all of that in a pipe and smoke it. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they're embargoing our oil, they might park it off our shore, but they won't bring it in for delivery. Robin, excellent point. You got the Cindy clip? The clip that Robin is referring to, Scotty, is this was not a public statement. In 1999, when George Bush was planning to run for president, but it was not yet public, his father and mother hired Mickey Herskowitz, who's a family friend, 20 years or more, lived in Texas, well-known Texas writer, and he ghostwrites books for people in addition to writing his own books. They hired him to write George Bush's autobiography. It's called A Charge to Keep. It's in bookstores right now. He did 100 interviews that he audio taped with George W. Bush, or 100 hours, rather, and he wrote the first draft of the book. And he told a reporter the following. Here's a verbatim quote. This is, again, from 1999. Fire.
As a matter of fact, in interviews in 1999 with respected journalists and longtime Bush family friend Mickey Herskowitz,
this is testimony before
then
Congress.
Governor George Bush stated,
under oath,
one of the keys to being seen as a great leader is to be seen as commander-in-chief. My father had all this political capital built up when he drove the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and he wasted it. If I have a chance to invade, if I had that much capital, I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to get everything passed that I want to get passed, and I'm going to have a successful presidency, end quote.
So here's Bush in 2 years before he's elected saying, if I get elected, I'm going to invade Iraq, and I'm going to do it so I can privatize Social Security, which he tried to do in 2005. He said, I got all this political capital. I want to privatize Social Security.
I love how you're sitting there taking the stretch from Iraq to privatizing Social Security.
No, he did.
I'm sorry.
In 1979, when he ran for Congress in Texas, that was his sole platform.
Was to privatize Social Security. But
That's
I love how
correct.
you're tying it now to Iraq. It has nothing to do with the chemical weapons. It has nothing to do with the
There
dictator.
were no chemical weapons.
There were chemical weapons.
there weren't.
Yes, they have. They've said here, as much as you can sit there and say they've proven there isn't, I can prove that there is. They've seen the trucks that went into Syria. They sat there and saw them.
No,
yes,
nobody saw them.
There were. You went to Iraq.
Maybe
I saw
on Fox
it.
News they saw them.
Okay, well we've seen the videos of the chemical trucks, and that's the thing that you have to look at. We can sit there and talk both sides of it. I'm not going to defend Bush.
All right.
I have my own issues with him too.
20 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Scotty Nell Hughes with me, the author of the new book, Roar, The New Conservative Woman Speaks Out. And Scotty, shall we take some phone calls?
We can. And let me just make this disclaimer out. Tom, I've always said this about you. I've always respected this about you. You're probably one of the smartest men I know on both sides of the aisle. You know details, you know history, you know your research. You've eat, breathed, and lived it for 30 years. But, and this is for anybody listening, I was like, oh, she's just a blonde talking. The one thing about you, you're so smart that you take one little fact and twist it. So it's not until I get home tonight, I'm reading my Twitter feed or watching people like, this is where it's twisted. Now, whether you do that on purpose, I don't think you do. I just think there's one thing, there's usually one little fact that separates you and I in opinion when it comes to when you're talking.
It may be. Certainly the narrative that I'm laying out is not the conventional wisdom narrative. The conventional wisdom narrative is not that if Reagan had not blown up Carter's policies, we would not be in the Middle East. I'll tell you, that's my position.
I hate to tell you this, we're going to be in the Middle East no matter what. The Bible says it. Allah says it. Whatever book you read, the Middle East is a powder
that's
keg
because
that's
all
going
those
to happen.
religions started in the Middle East.
Well, that's why they started.
If you want to start quoting, Buddhism, or you want to start quoting Hinduism, then hey, we're going to be in Bangalore.
There's nothing that's going to bring peace to the Middle East. Israel's never going to be at peace. Let's just be realistic about it. The question is, how do we keep people contained in their own and not going after each other?
I think we need to stop pouring fuel on that fire, but
I would rather pour it in my gas tank for less prices, and that would only happen if we opened up things like the Keystone Pipeline.
How about pouring electricity into your gas? Well, no.
Have you tried this electricity stuff? Okay, let's talk about.
Ever driven an electric car?
Actually, Tesla, one of my favorite stocks. But oh my goodness, did they just found out that their battery at 10,000 miles just goes kaputs? And, I mean, the problem is we need the technology to advance, but I don't want to use taxpayer funds.
Put $5 billion into this new battery factory.
Well, and that's why I'm happy with private funds. The problem is with things like the stimulus, where we sit here and take taxpayer funds and pour into it.
So we never should have invented the internet.
Oh, Al Gore. Did Al Gore take taxpayer funds to invent it?
He actually voted for the legislation that created the internet.
Okay, gotcha. On that side of it. Yeah. Well, like I said, like I said, you know the facts, and you take a little bit, and we disagree on it.
So we shouldn't have invented Velcro. We shouldn't have invented the transistor. These were all government-funded things, the integrated circuit.
I do not believe in sitting there and using it as a way to stimulate our economy, to use it as an excuse. Was Velcro the excuse used to sit there and bring us out of the Great Depression or whenever it was done?
No, building the roads all across the United States was the excuse.
Yeah,
and
that
it worked.
Well, that's not what brought us out of the Great Depression.
Highway system.
The little thing called a World War brought us out.
The biggest government spending program of the 20th century.
Okay, well,
it was huge government stimulus.
Well, yeah, because it was actually defending ourselves because the people came onto our land and bombed us, and so we got involved.
Yeah, but it was government stimulus that got us out of it.
It's a little. We're also defending our border. We're defending our own. There's a big difference between that and let's go, put solar panels on the top of, the Sonic.
Okay, so during World War II, if we spent $1 million on bombs and then we dropped them on Hitler, our return on investment was zero, right? We lost that money. On the other hand, if we had taken that $1 million, as Roosevelt had been doing earlier, and we built the TVA or we built the Hoover Dam, those are still generating electricity 70 years later. And
Hitler and his people didn't want to come over and hurt Americans?
Well, I'm not saying that we shouldn't.
Last time I checked, they did bomb Pearl Harbor to get us involved.
Well, that was the Japan, not the Nazis. But I'm not trying to relitigate World War II. What I'm saying is that war is an effective stimulant for an economy, but it's the least effective. The most effective is where you take the same amount of money and you spend it and you invest it rather than spending it. War is an expense. Building roads and bridges and dams are an investment.
So how did that stimulus project work out for our economy?
Well, it took us from losing 700,000 jobs a month to a net average of about 120,000 jobs a month being gained.
Yeah, we're going to sit there and factor in certain things.
Obama saved us in the Great Depression.
Obama saved us, yes. This is where we have a little bit of an issue on this one. But we're going to disagree. Let's back to our callers.
Back to ISIS. Susan in Palmyra, New York. Hey, Susan, you're on the air.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I've almost forgotten what I was going to say. All this other
I think we're back to ISIS, right?
Yes. Well, I wanted to talk about how we in this country will always want to strike back when we are attacked. Like in 9/11, it's almost like we don't care who we strike or try to strike. It's like we want to get even.
Yeah, I think this is a very, Susan, this is a very human instinct. When Marius Vander, whatever his name was, Slug, I think, burned the German Parliament building, the Reichstag Hitler ran down while it was on fire. stood in front, grabbed a microphone, and said, "This is a sign from God that I'm supposed to be the chancellor and take on the evil communists and Jews who did this." And, bang, Germany was off to the races. They were under attack. Same thing with 9/11.
Yes, and I don't, just like with the death penalty, so many of us want to
it's revenge.
Murder, yeah. To me, it doesn't make sense when we say murder is wrong.
Yeah.
Then we murder. But
I get it. I think we're starting to wander far afield. But Susan, good point. Scotty, what? A, you can feel free to respond to that. B, I'm curious what you want the president to say tonight.
First of all, I think it's very inappropriate that the president is even speaking tonight. Whether we,
How dare he? He's only the president of the United States.
How dare he on prime time the night before 9/11? We have very few holidays. I don't know. I remember, you probably know where you were on 9/11. I know where I was. If we're sitting here dealing with the same beast that attacked us, even though this is the little brother.
It's not a
It's a beast.
It's like 10, 20,000 people.
Islamic terrorists are beasts.
Smaller than the
They
mafia.
have declared that they want to kill us. They hate Americans. They hate Western civilization.
I'm not afraid of it.
Okay, well, like I said, I'm glad you're not afraid.
I'm not afraid.
I'm not afraid of him either, but I also want to have a country that's, has a good defense on it. That's all he's doing. Very
You're
inappropriate.
listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
Scotty and Nell Hughes, her new book is Roar. Available online right now and in bookstores next week. The New Conservative Woman Speaks Out. Thank you, Scotty.
Thank you for having me.
Great to see you. We'll be back.